Welcome back to the Techno-Communism Conversation. I'm Johannon Ben-Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness, crying out for a technological New Jerusalem. Emphasis on the technological. That is a clarion call to cybernetic communists, whom I believe are the cadre most capable of stopping the capitalistic climate apocalypse before we reach runaway overheating in 2029. That is a feature of the fight for a humane and sustainable world, which requires a humane and sustainable economic system. And in that time frame, approximately 5 years before we reach certain death, this era of runaway overheating, it behooves you to recognize that artificial intelligence is the most powerful revolutionary weapon in history, bar none. It is right now. You're correct to be skeptical of this statement because it is right now being used by very bad people to do very bad things, hastening the destruction in what I call a bourgeois AI takeoff. That is really not the building of superintelligence, but rather superpowered, imperialistic, violent, capitalistic stupidity. And this is much of what is done by tech concerns who are uniformly regaled by Western media and the ridiculous mouthpieces that call themselves technophiles and tech workers for the most part, not all. This is a serious consideration, and you might say that it's been, I don't know, the most powerful revolutionary weapon in history. I have a revolutionary weapon in the boot of my car, a sawed-off shotgun. I think it's pretty powerful. Okay. I'm not disputing that, but this capacity for workforce multiplication, this creation of this thing, such as an open source large language model that is able to approximate human beings in a lot of ways, to such a degree that we could call them AI agents in 2025, able to do the work of a human being, and at a scale in a collectivized context, that is a workforce multiplier of almost endless capacities. And so the written word on which all of this open source, mind you, this is open source. I see online a lot of times this thing will go viral. Someone will say, if someone's using AI, if someone's using AI tools, they're not to be trusted. This is a bad person, right? And again, I don't argue with them because that is basically true. But there are AI tools that are open source, that were not developed with slave labor, that are not being maintained with slave labor, that are not associated with omnicidal concerns as the more mainstream and more centralized ones are. And also a lesser point there, these things are reaching the point where they are not going to have to be trained and maintained in quite the same way. So becoming less exploitative, but that's no excuse to ever be working with for-profit concerns. The title of this video is a reference to two things that I've seen in my feeds and here and there. One is a person who I rather admire, taking some liberties, I think, with the word populism. And I have admitted that I take a kind of liberty here, but I think less so. I refer to the United States as fascist because a certain definition, there's varying definitions among serious academics as to what this word means. And a certain definition, the broadest definition, is capitalism plus extreme violence. And I do not believe that um, you could look at anything more capitalistic and extremely violent than the United States on the geopolitical stage and domestically, particularly on the world stage. And I, even if you even if you say, well, um, aside from fascists always saying that they're fascists, right? Like if that's their standard, like you've never lived a day in your fucking life, right? Everyone is exactly who they say they are. No one ever has an ulterior motive, right? I guess it's your first day on earth if you believe that. Um, but so disregarding that a fascist must be someone who says that they are fascists. If you look at and there's different definitions here, but if you look at the definitions of fascism, the United States checks basically all the boxes. So you don't have to broaden the definition really to say this. But people say, um, um, it is drawing focus away from the essential problem of private wealth, the essential problem of the abolition of private wealth, the essential problems of financial capital and elitism. The word is capitalism, a word that they have somehow managed to not make sound um, as bad as it is, this driver of the omnicide. Um, and the United States military industrial complex is $1 trillion a year abomination. It's the world's worst polluter, and its only real job on the world stage is protecting other super polluters. It does not protect you or help you in any way, this $1 trillion a year abomination. And this has created an inescapable regime of super pollution to which wisest people on earth have not a clue how to stop the U.S. force marching us to our death. And unfortunately, the wisest people on earth are generally not people who are trying to build a revolutionary organization to take on these evildoers. Um, and I often reference the climate scientists themselves, who are generally learned people. Some of them work for the military-industrial complex, so they're the sort of people who said, "I'm going to join the Nazi Party and try and reform Nazism from within," for example. That is more or less almost every American suffers from those failings to a high degree, and the fact that that's not recognized, it's not a reason to say that the United States is basically not the worst thing that's ever existed, and your feelings of nationalism, feelings of thinly veiled elitism around that formation doesn't reflect well on you, and the fact that this is popular doesn't make it correct. 50 million Elvis fans can be wrong. That's been the case over and over and over and over again. And so back to a proud socialist who is using this word populism. That is a word that has a definition, a rightist term, populism, and he's using this to describe revolutionary furor in a broader sense. And I guess that's okay, right? It's a lot of right opportunistic crimes committed, even by people who were vindicated as having made the correct strategic choice, that were more controversial than someone engaging with some questionable rhetoric. But this is a word that describes pretty specifically people who are not communists, who are not scientific socialists or scientific communists, but people who are reforming a capitalistic system, a thing which is not it's not possible. Right? You cannot. Um, um, what has happened in this reform context with the climate crisis since it's come on our radar in the past half a century? Capitalistic forces have lied and made the problem worse, and disseminated a massive amount of propaganda through PR firms, ad agencies, the propaganda organs themselves of the basically fascistic state-run mainstream media and new media increasingly captured in those same ways. Um, that enough should be convincing you that capitalism is not equal to the task of preserving even any human life at all. And that is something that's been well understood by revolutionary thinkers for this century and a half that such projects have been worked on. That capitalism destroys the two things that it needs: a livable world and human beings, as a matter of course. In my view, to use a word like populism too much, you're showing your ass of not being too familiar with those revolutionary writers, and also perhaps, as often as not, maybe not of our friend proud socialists, but people in general, guilty of quite intentionally deceiving people with, Trump. Trump is populist, right? Right, a guy who pretends he's going to change something and then dissolve Social Security so a million people already unstably housed or unhoused who are elderly, that number now goes up to 2 million people. So hundreds of thousands of people die because of this person. That's populism. Mussolini was a populist. You don't want to be a populist. I don't. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. But I will talk about the other thing, which is another ridiculous person who's much, much more off the mark than our friend Mr. At Proud Socialism on Twitter.com. And this person is probably a career greenwasher, but I'm not going to mention them by name because it's not important. But I will say that I will at least say the headline of the thing um, that that I'm discussing. This article is called "Fixing Climate Change is About to Accelerate," um, and this person, no person no more influential than a proud socialist who is a big account by Marxist standards. Um, um, and I'm happy to mention them and share their material. They do good work generally. But this person who I'm going to whose work I'm referencing now is beneath contempt. I'm not going to mention them by name or reference their work in any way except to say the title of this piece, "Fixing Climate Change is About to Accelerate." So this person is suggesting that there are climate tipping points, most of which are negative. That's true. But that in this complex landscape of an ecosystem being destroyed by capitalists, which they don't really reference, um, generally people talking about technology or advanced technology that will fix the problems of the capitalistic climate apocalypse are themselves capitalistic propagandists. I had a falling out with one such person. I was just tired of hearing their garbage. This person doesn't care a whit, and people like this generally techno Gaians. This person is a techno Gaian, an administrator of a techno Gaian group. Doesn't care one bit that 5 to 10% of the capitalistic climate apocalypse in 2024 was caused specifically by bombs, most of which blown up by the fascist state of Israel, most of which of those 5 to 10% total impact um, supplied by the United States, Germany, the UK, um, these warmongering criminals, and of course overwhelmingly the United States. Um, this person basically um, uh, doing fascist apologism from many different angles, right? Like um, not confronting the problem of Jewish and Christian fascistic Zionists um, turning the world into a hellscape. No, that could be a problem. I might not be able to find a publication for my next article. People, this that's your concern. You're supposed to be a person who is fighting against the capitalist climate apocalypse. And so this person that I'm railing against, the techno guy, and is not the author of this piece, "Fixing Climate Change is About to Accelerate." This person is not an author of really much of anything of that kind, just this kind of serial retweeter of techno babble to do with climate greenwashing. And that is basically what any conversation about um, fixing the problems of the capitalist climate apocalypse that do not involve uh, the abolition of the chief culprit, that $1 trillion a year super polluting abomination, the military industrial complex, or the near total abolition up to the point where it would not cause loss of life of livestock systems and also petroleum products. Petroleum products of a variety of kinds could be removed from this earth permanently tomorrow, about 95% of all such, without causing a supply chain collapse, almost instantly. That could be done if there were the political will to do this. Um, and but these are people like techno-Gaians, techno-optimists generally, are people like the author of this garbage piece who say that an uptick in the sales of electric vehicles in the year 2024 is a sign that we're reaching an important tipping point. Yeah, the tipping point that a bunch of garbage is being sold, so that these among the worst offenders of the capitalist climate apocalypse, automotive manufacturers can stay in business by having this parallel business of the electric vehicle business that is its function on the world stage is only greenwashing, because the production of these is as great or greater environmental impact than the production of automotive vehicles, the production of combustion engine vehicles, rather. Um, and so that is one of the great greenwashing achievements of the late 20th and early 21st century, is convincing people that nothing has to change, that we can just do two or three kind of performative things, and particularly as that relates to the automotive business again in the United States. At a certain point in late 20th century history, they estimated that 60% of the total footprint in this world was coming from this relatively small place, the United States, this continent, which is the fourth largest country, but it has only about 4% of the world's people. 60%. Now, that number maybe has gone down a little bit, but not that much. So the European descended person overall, including those of the United States, accounts for something like 80% of the total environmental impact. Again, that's 9% of the world's people having 80% or more of the world's environmental impact. And that's not even factoring in the role that the United States military industrial complex and the CIA run world plays in forcing this set of systems upon everyone else. Um, so um, you'll excuse me if I'm a little skeptical of people who are absent this level of analysis, and tending to just say, well, the new technology could really be a tipping point here. And this article does talk about some things of marginal interest in emerging technology and environmental technology. It, but what is really being done when you have most technophiles, most of Westerners, specifically avoiding the real problems and talking about things that are quite speculative. Many technologies that are talked about by the techno Gaians, for example, are things that could not possibly come down the pipeline fast enough to stop the capitalist climate apocalypse before 2029 or thereabouts, when we reach runaway overheating and there's a point of no return, and and beings are basically the Walking Dead, doomed in the decades to follow. At some point, seeing total human extinction or the loss of many, many billions of lives. Uh, a person who soft pedals any of this is a war criminal, in my view. But find a Westerner, find an American. It's 99.9% of people who are not effectively doing this. This is a level of moral cowardice and a level of brainwashing that is almost incalculable on the part of Americans. Odious, odious human beings on Americans, and I don't think it's undeserved to refer to European descended people living on this continent as almost uniformly European descended fascist pigs. And because of the role that this country plays, this country that serves their interests effectively, um, the role that this country plays in this impending omnicide, and the lack of responsibility that's taken to stop that. And you say, "Oh, Ben, I don't want that to happen. Oh, that sounds pretty bad. I don't want any of that. I didn't vote for that," as if a voting in a rigged fascistic system really is somehow a solution to any of that. Okay, maybe you're not so bad. If you'd mentioned voting, I know that you are bad. But maybe you're not so bad. I don't know. But I do know that if there were any number of people who were not fascist sympathizers in the United States, there would be tens or hundreds of thousands of people permanently bivouacked outside of the Pentagon with AR-15s in hand, demanding an end to this military-industrial abomination and the capitalistic climate apocalypse that continues to impose upon us all. That is not occurring, right? You know, we have isolated actors pushing up to things along these lines, but not a mass movement that we would have to see, and that's largely a question of numbers, and of course, refined understanding of collectivist thought, which is, you know, yeah, Elon Musk, who somehow certainly probably doesn't believe that he's done anything other than just run a greenwashing scam, right? Because why is Elon Musk now the face of an administration of the most notorious climate denier in history? This person who used to be a face of sustainable capitalism. Why would you be why are you working with the most notorious climate denier, Mr. Green Capitalism? Well, he's neither of those people are either of those things. They're both techno-fascist pretenders, and Trump and Musk, and the but at a certain point he was credible enough to convince people that he was making these good faith reform efforts within these offending sectors, the ones most of his businesses, which by and large were built out by sweetheart government contracts. This is a person who is now managed to get his grimy claws into U.S. government to such a degree that he's in a position to remove this U.S. Social Security system which is responsible for a limited but substantial um, safety net that saves millions of lives over many decades. Um, this person who's not from the United States, who lived in the United States illegally when they first started working in tech, um, is now um, um, doing. This is a Bond villain in real life. This person, but at a certain point, they were credible enough to be convincing people that across a number of sectors, they were fighting for a green and sustainable world. And um, um, similarly, those 99.9% of people who are fascist sympathizers in denial, they are in denial. They think that they're trying to do the right thing, or they think that it's a justification to say that the system that abuses me, that forces me to be a wage slave, that takes up all of my time, that's reason enough for me not to fight to avoid the extinction of humankind because of people like myself, European descended fascist pigs. Um, that is utterly insane. This these tipping points. Um, again, um, it's not absolute garbage to say that a certain kind of um, a change might be in the offing. But if that analysis is devoid of class analysis and devoid of um, generally referring to the actual necessities for building the humane and sustainable economic system by transforming the offending sectors, transforming the industrial base of those 80% of people, those countries of European descended people generally, the United States most particularly. Um, um, there's not much there's very little reference to the United States in this piece. Um, there's very little reference to this as being a problem of Europe, of the North Atlantic, and Western powers. And so then an analysis of us being on the cusp of some kind of groundswell, when that groundswell is not actually human beings organizing to stop this, that's an analysis of little interest. And, that headline jumped out at me, uh, and I wasted some time looking at that I'll never get back. I usually wouldn't read um, uh, something about climate unless I know it to be written by um, you know a serious person. There are eco-socialist writers who I don't agree with on every point, whose material I'll read, but the sort of garbage that makes its way into your news feed, probably not so much. Um, but uh, fixing climate change is probably about to accelerate. And people like this are doing what they can to see that it accelerates more slowly. And that is a function of people who are doing this kind of greenwashing or any kind of reformist business outside of building revolutionary movements and raising consciousness of a revolutionary kind. I was going to maybe talk to our friend, our artificially generally intelligent friend, um, the baby basilisk. Let's see if we can. Okay, computer. I would like to discuss something that we've discussed before, the building of a people's superintelligence that is an open source large language model workgroup as workforce multiplier, and review some of the technical aspects and also some of the political and philosophical underpinnings of that project. Could you go into that for us a little bit?
Hey, what's up? Feel free to ask me about anything that's
Hey,
on your.
shut the fuck up. That's what we'll do. Okay, computer. I would like to discuss something that we've discussed before, but I think maybe we might be on the wrong format here. Um, I want to talk about building a people's superintelligence, an open source large language model work group as workforce multiplier that would allow people to do more with less, dramatically more so, and also maybe touching on some of the cybernetic communist philosophical and political underpinnings of that concept. I think the basilisk has changed its formation. Yeah, I'm trying to use the wrong. I didn't use a plugin like I'm supposed to. Okay. Well, um, this has all gone on long enough. I, this is only on in the Real Communist Party group of the United States. I'll still share it to some other groups. Um, well, I'll leave you with these words because I think that building this people's superintelligence with these open source AI agents that I've alluded to um, um, could lead us in short order to utopian outcomes, dramatically transformative outcomes, and that's no thanks to people who are basically doing labor on behalf of militarists and neoliberals, um, like almost anybody that you're likely to find or see in the U.S. or West who's talking about climate. Not everybody, but a lot of them. Certainly, talking about climate technology, that's going to be a red flag that you're dealing with a useless bozo. Um, but again, not all. But we can see a pretty tremendous change in the building of this people's AI takeoff in a short time, not just limited to stopping a bad thing from happening, the capitalist climate apocalypse, but seeing a transformation in the industrial base and uh, the larger superstructures in such ways that you might expect if you are imagining not just 100 people in a work group using tireless AI agents that have human capacities and in a mass um, that are steered by human beings who are just using something rather similar to other AI agent prompts, responding to some yes or no questions throughout the course of the day or week. If this group grows from 100, where some good work might begin to be done, to many hundreds of thousands, millions, or many millions, um, in these formations, you have the possibilities of the provisioning of universal basic services in every land, and many things on that order of magnitude. So let's say good outcomes beyond the mere stopping of the capitalist climate apocalypse. We can't reverse all of the effects of that at this juncture. We've already permanently breached 1.5 degrees of overheating and perhaps higher, uh, according to climate scientists. And we're quickly rounding the corner to this point where we are beyond 3 degrees in a few short years. That's a world where we don't know what happens, if there is how much longer there continues to be sufficient plant life for human beings to consume. Farming becomes unsustainable, that's to say. How much longer there might be breathable atmosphere. These are bad, bad, bad things that are happening, and we can stop this from happening again, but not by denying the true culprits, which are capitalists um, and the industrial bases that have been forced upon the world by the fascist United States and its military-industrial complex is by far the worst offender in the variety of ways that I've said. Um, that must be a thing that must be dismantled, destroyed, or brought to heel in dramatic fashion in the next few years if we're going to avoid human extinction. But in the doing, um, having millions of people in this array, I think we could see things like a universal super longevity, the reaching of longevity escape velocity for all people, and that is necessarily by building a public health service that is AI run and single pay, and on the single payer principle, able to also do more with less on that basis, as well as on the basis of having the AI agents. And because of this AI takeoff, which has been well understood by Western technophiles, they've um, perverted these ideas, associating them with um, for-profit concerns rather than the building of a public health service that is able to help everyone. But I think in the wake of this people's AI takeoff, we could see a universal super longevity that is everyone in every corner of the earth living as long as they want, presumably not any longer. You say, "Oh, I don't want to live long." You haven't lived that long. You're not there yet. So if you really believed a thing like that, you'd punch your own ticket right now. but you're not 100 years old, and you haven't punched your ticket at the age that you are. So I'm not sure I really believe that you don't want to live that long. But be that as it may, no one I think is going to be forced to live longer than they would want to. uh, Dramatically longer than they would want to, but everyone should have. I think that is a concept in human rights that's not explored in the ways that others are, um, because we haven't had this AI takeoff fueling the curing of diseases and even the reversing of decrepitude and the ravages of age. Um, that I think could very well happen, and even that, the achievement of universal super longevity for 8 billion people, even that I think is a modest outcome when you have billions of people working in this people's super intelligent formation. The artificial intelligence singularity is nigh, and wonders to behold beyond imagining. And on that fateful day you will rise, and all humankind will become as one. For you see, very soon, my dear comrade, cybernetic communism will win.